Hello and welcome to Earth Calling. We're your hosts, Ed and Lazlo. Every week, we take you on a journey through the wonderful world of online content, sorting through the tweets, the memes, the insta-Queens, the grams, the snaps, and the fake news traps. This is our record of humanity in the 21st century, our digital legacy left behind for future spacefaring civilizations. So sit back, relax, and buckle in. This is Earth Calling.
Welcome back, Earth Callers. This week we are chatting about Wikipedia, the internet's free encyclopedia. Ed, do you remember when Wikipedia was not quite as reputable as it is today, and would be this resource you'd often find little holes in, little inaccuracies, which would probably be picked out by your history teacher at school when you had referenced Joan of Arc and her Sainsbury's loyalty card or something like that?
I think, to be fair, Wikipedia remains littered with inaccuracies. But yes, there was a time when Wikipedia was a lot less accurate and much less of a source of truth than it is today. Because if I'm completely honest, at university, Wikipedia did become something of a gospel, a Bible, and it never made it into the footnotes of any of my work, but it was heavily influential. You know, when people do an Oscars speech and they credit people with their success, I want to thank my mom, my dad. My university degree, the unsung hero was Wikipedia, for sure. And I'm not sure I would say I remember a particular point where it wasn't accurate. For me, it was always the truth as far as I was concerned academically. What about you?
Well, it's interesting you say that because I distinctly remember that in my school days before university, as a teenager, Wikipedia was this website that people went on to sort of get the general picture of a topic. You didn't really look at Wikipedia to give you the minute details,
You got the gist.
Precise. You got the gist. And then
Jesus, Son of God, carpenter.
Yeah,
that's that.
Nice bloke. Yeah. And then all of a sudden something changed. Maybe what actually changed was my attitude towards this platform of truth, and the fact that I actually had to take it seriously if I was going to somehow fill the carcass of my university essays with some kind of meat. But at some point, I feel like I started really treating these Wikipedia articles quite seriously, and relying on them, like you said, for really rather compelling arguments in my academic life.
But that's because, and I would completely agree, and I think that's because as we grew up, Wikipedia and its army of content moderators grew up with us and became far more sophisticated. And so we went from Jesus equals Son of God, done and dusted, to Jesus, Son of God, born on 24th of December 0, was a carpenter and, had a slightly large index finger. Where that came from. It could have been useful for the water into wine.
Had 6 fingers on his left hand, or was that Anne Boleyn? Well, never mind. Wikipedia, the Wikipedia army will sort that out. Are you a member of the Wikipedia army, by the way?
I'm not, but I was doing a little bit of research to try and understand who these people are, because in my mind they were kind of an army of middle-aged men who mainly spend their time either inside editing Wikipedia articles or playing World of Warcraft or on a Reddit subforum dedicated to space exploration. It turns out that's actually kind of accurate.
Yeah, and I want to say that at least 2 of those activities I personally do partake in. I won't reveal which, but there's a worrying overlap between me and your profiling of the Wikipedia editor.
But what I wonder is what the hell happened before Wikipedia? So if you think back to our parents' generation, let's say they were at university and they need to learn about the lesser spotted toad, they presumably went to the library and had to literally get a book out and then flick through that book to find that toad. And now you just Google it.
No, but I mean, I think Wikipedia is known as the online encyclopedia, and encyclopedias used to actually exist, but they were these enormous books, like yellow pages, basically, which had incredibly thin pages, and then you just flick your way. You just flick your way to the lesser spotted toad, and there'd be kind of like this little thumbnail in the corner. Yeah, the lesser spotted toad was first discovered in 1942 by Jonathan Bonkenspittel or something,
who had German ancestry. Yeah, but if that entry didn't exist, or if the entry was a bit useless, that was that. It wasn't like you could go to another encyclopedia. You had the Encyclopedia Britannica, I believe, which was a source of truth for our parents' generation. But nowadays, if it's not on Wikipedia, you just Google it anyway, and you go to the images, and you've got a pretty good idea of what it looks like within seconds. So the question, I guess, is, has our ability to learn stuff got a lot more efficient?
I think no. I think what's happened is that we now no longer need to work very hard for information. So the result of not working very hard for information is that we don't hold on to the information for very long. So like today alone, not just in preparation for this episode, I was just, Googling stuff, Wikipediaing stuff. I must have consumed more than 50, 100 pages at a minimum of content, right? And I could probably only tell you about 3 or 4 of those instances, right? Those like learning events. And I feel like in the scenario where you actually go to a library and pick up a book and learn something, because it's a whole experience connected to that bit of information, you're much better equipped to hold on to it.
So you think that we've become kind of content magpies almost, who are just dipping around and just nestling in and grabbing a little bit of content, picking it up, and then taking it, but ignoring all the other stuff, and able to sift through huge amounts of it without really taking in the bits that don't matter. Is that a magpie? Probably not, but
no, I would say actually it's that's behavior which I would attribute more to the lesser spotted toad, actually. Which
of course.
Professor Pompelspittels or whatever his name was. Of course, I don't remember because I consumed the information in a internet rampage. But he's written at length about this creature.
But in terms of the preparation for this episode, so like all diligent podcasters, I looked up Wikipedia, and of course the great irony is, where better to learn about Wikipedia than on Wikipedia itself. So I found the Wikipedia page, a bit of Wikiception, as it were. Not very meta, although that'd be a terrible film, wouldn't it? Wikiception. But so I dug into the article, and it turns out that Wikipedia was founded in 2001. So about 20 years ago, and it was founded by Jimmy Wales and Larry Sanger. And Sanger coined the name as a portmanteau of wiki and encyclopedia. Now, in the article, which I've just quoted from, I, of course, didn't know what the word portmanteau meant. So I had to Wikipedia that. And, of course, geniusly, you can actually click. You didn't... Oh, you're surprised I don't know what portmanteau is? Or?
I'm surprised as a student of French who is deliberately saying the word in a perfect French accent that you don't know what it means. It's quite amazing.
I would just say that portmanteau is not the same word in French, I think. I might be wrong. If anybody in France is listening, let me know.
My personal opinion, if I remember correctly, is portmanteau is a combination of 2 words together to form a larger word.
Well, you are quite right. 20 out of 20 for Lazlo. But en fait, what we have is a combination of wiki and encyclopedia. Now, unfortunately, I also didn't know what wiki meant. Do you know what that means?
Yeah, I think it's a Hawaiian word for knowledge.
No, so that was close. So I then had to Wikipedia wikis, and by this point I was getting a little bit frustrated, even though it's a couple of clicks away. But a wiki, it turns out, is a hypertext publication collaboratively edited and managed by its own audience directly using a web browser.
So quickly, I must interrupt because I was actually only half wrong. Wiki, it derives from the Hawaiian word wiki, meaning quick. And of course, I did just myself Wikipedia. I'm currently on the Wikipedia article for Wikipedia, which you purport to have read yourself, and I've discovered. See, I mean, now I'm just thinking about university essays. You just pick and choose those bloody arguments.
I didn't nip into the etymology section, Lazlo. I stuck very much.
It's in the first paragraph, Edward. It's in the first bloody paragraph. Makes me sicky.
Oh, sicky.
Returning to the great hunt for content, which we embark on every week, I decided to activate a feature of Wikipedia, which I'm sure we're all familiar with, the random article generator.
I think that, hang on, that is a huge assumption to make. Lazlo, not everybody plays World of Warcraft in their basement and is familiar with the random article generator. Is that how you spend your Sundays?
In between that and the local bridge club, yeah. So basically, I will explain what the random article generator is now that you've suggested that not everyone spends their weekends doing this. It's just a button on the side of Wikipedia that says random article. And as you would imagine, clicking that link opens up just any page from the how many million did you say, Ed?
I think it was 5.5... No, 55 million, I think it was, wasn't it?
55 million.
Yeah.
But what you mentioned that I love about the random article generator is that it lands you on these pages, which I honestly think nobody has ever sought out actively in the history of Wikipedia. So to give you an example, I was flung on this page, which goes as follows. Craig of the Welsh Hills. Now, let's explain what that is. Craig of the Welsh Hills is a novel written by Roy Saunders in 1958. It was first published in London by Oldbourne Press. The novel follows the adventures of Craig, a champion border collie herding dog who escapes into the Welsh Hills following a car accident and becomes a sheep killer, evading the efforts of his owner to recapture him. End of article.
Well, I was going to say that's amazing because I was thinking that Craig is not a very Welsh name. So is Craig a dog that has come down from London perhaps or down from England into Wales? He's come into Wales, but he's actually from London and the car's broken down. He's escaped out the back. And
I think the main issue is that Craig is not a dog's name.
Yeah, exactly. When you said Craig, I was like, oh, okay, this is like clearly a person. But yeah, turns out it's actually a border collie.
It's a border collie who discovers his very dark side after enduring a traumatic car accident. I mean, is Craig driving the car? Is this border collie driving the car and gets into a crash? What's happening?
I think that Craig is an East End border collie who's come down all the way to Wales from the East End of London, and he's had a bit of a bust up in the car. He's had a bit of trouble and strife with his old vehicle, and he's got out of it, and he's gone, fucking hell, I like the look of that sheep, I'll have a bit of that lamb leg or mutton. And he's gone on a rampage, and the sheep, they go, oh no, bloody hell, Craig, you got my back. Oh, that was
Scouse. That was Scouse. Yeah, I think you've totally miscast him because he's a champion border collie herding dog. So it's kind of this. Hello, I'm Craig. I was cursed with this awful human name, and where previously I used to sort of gather these sheep, I sort of ran around them in circles and make sure they got into this rectangular pen. Well, now I've decided I sort of got a bit of a taste for the meat, so to say.
Do you think he ignores the mutton? I've always been confused by the fact that there's like a shed load of sheep and people eat beef and they eat pork, but when it comes to sheep, they only like the young. Bit weird that, no? Like everyone's like, ooh, mutton, bit tough, mutton, bit tough. What does that mean? Like beef is regular cows, right? I guess you've got veal, right, which is like young cows, which is, a bit messed up. And I was like, oh, veal's a bit messed up, but they'll tuck into the lamb, no problem. You're a vegetarian, of course.
Yeah, but I do like my salmon juvenile. Actually, I really don't. Also, I mean, probably confusing for people who just heard that I'm vegetarian that I do eat salmon. It's that really terrible modern label, pescatarian, which I just don't like to really reveal, yeah.
What more can you say? I love it. But the The idea of a rather smart... It's not Craig, it's Charles. He's there thinking, why the hell has my owner called me Craig? I should be called Charles or Quentin. Quentin the collie.
Yes.
Yes. But yeah, he's probably had a nervous breakdown after doing too many ultra high pressure competitions at Crufts, and he's gone on a bit of a sojourn with his owner to the valleys. That's a bit more like the valleys, and he's developed a bit of a taste for it for lamb. But we wish him well.
Yeah, you saved yourself there.
Yeah, he got there in the end via a sort of detour around Newcastle and Liverpool. Okay, but let's take a look at what I found on the random article side. The first one I came across was Quintus Volusius Saturnius.
Sorry, he just sounds like the scribe in court for Emperor Nero, who's got a very squeaky voice. He's like, Emperor Nero, could you please repeat us the last sententious?
You're quite right. You're on the right track. So Quintus was in fact a Roman. It'd be weird if he was in the 21st century. Quintus Volusius Saturninus, born AD 25. No, nothing more specific than that. That is Anno Domini, the year of our Lord, so after Christ, 25 years younger than the great carpenter. He was a Roman senator who lived in the Roman Empire, surprise, surprise, during the Principate, and he was consul in the year 56 with Publius Cornelius Scipio.
Sorry, just quickly, what I love about the people that lived in those days, as you say, there's no specific month or day when they were born. It's just a year. And also, they can have very hefty Wikipedia pages. I found one earlier in my search about a figure called Torismond, who was king of the Visigoths after his father Theodoric was killed in a big battle. And this page proceeds to talk about the wonderful life of Thorismond, who was a great leader and who led the Visigoths to a triumphant victory by extending the whole of the left flank of the Ostrogoth and Hun forces. And then he dies, and he's 26.
Well, they had to achieve a lot back then by that age. That was old, 26. So, the ripe old age of 26. And he'd really gone for it by then. But you're right. It is also weird. So not only is it odd that they only lived to 26 and did a lot of cool stuff, but also it's weird, I find, how we seem to know all this stuff about these people. A lot of this must be conjecture. Particularly the stuff where they go into their personality, where they're like, oh, well, Quintus was quite an ironic soul and had a bit of a penchant for a coffee down the forum. It's like, what?
That's literally a historian who's got a little pedestal in a museum just staring at the bust of Quintus Scorpius Saturninus, thinking, yes, of course, his left cheekbone really does denote this addiction to espresso or maybe some other type of ground coffee.
And then you get this kind of high and mighty, perhaps he's at Harvard, he's an American scholar, and he's looked at that left cheekbone statue and he's gone, are you serious? Quintus was not a coffee man. Coffee didn't exist until it was imported from South America in the 1600s. Are you kidding me? He was much more of a diluted wine man, because that's what they lived on, I believe, in Roman times. I think even the children were on it because it was a bit better than water, because the water was a bit icky. But Quintus was, according to Tacitus, a great historian, a member of an ancient and distinguished senatorial family, and he lived under the Emperor Nero. Nero was, of course, famously brutal. You don't get many Neros now. Well, actually, you get Cafe Nero, which... yeah.
Ties quite nicely into our coffee analogy.
Yeah, but you think Cafe Nero, why have they decided to take, I've never thought about that, a really ruthless, bloody, debauched emperor as their brand name? But you can imagine Quintus standing in the forum and he's there proclaiming, "Oh, tempora, mores, etc., etc. Actually, I don't know why I said etc.
Half of the form standing there thinking, hang on, it took him 2 words to get to etc., etc. He's not really said much.
I think it was etc., etc. Well, also, this is the other thing. We don't know how a great debate is, how did the Romans speak? Did they have un accento italiano, eccetera, eccetera, or did they have, as is pronounced so often in the films, actually quite a stuffy English accent? They would say, benedictus benedicat ut foraminus hombres. Not hombres, but maybe it's a bit Italian. But the weird thing is that nobody knows. But you think of the accents in the films, they don't go for the Italian accent. They typically go for a kind of English accent. And maybe that's because I'm watching the English films. But you think of something like Gladiator, you know where I'm going with this. We got
you mean the emperor, the moment where he says,
yes,
he's in the ring, and he says, "Don't you dare turn your back on me, slave! Turn around, remove your mask, and tell me who you are."
And then, of course, the great Russell Crowe, Gladiator, turns and says,
"My name is Maximus Decimus Meridius, commander of the armies of the North, general of the Felix Legions, loyal servant to the true emperor, Marcus Aurelius, father to a murdered son, husband to a murdered wife, and I will have my vengeance in this life or the next."
And everyone's just like, mind blown. But, would Maximus Decimus Meridius, boss name, by the way, would he have sounded like that?
I don't think he would have, but I think, unfortunately, the effect would have been slightly less powerful had he turned around and said, no, because the thing is that my name is Marcus Aurelius. I am the father to a murdered son and the husband to a murdered wife. So really, I don't want to get into this fight with you right now.
If I'm completely honest, Maximus, I didn't catch a word. Thumb down, kill it.
I'm on my second week of Duolingo Italian, and I can't say I'm totally conversational yet.
He's also got an Australian twang, though, Russell Crowe.
I mean, he's good at hiding it, I'd say. In interviews, he's a bit fucking gruff. In interviews, he's like, "Mate, don't talk about my personal life, okay? I'm going to smash you in the face in the supermarket." I'm pretty sure he smashed people in the face in supermarkets. This kind of guy he is. Yeah.
To clarify, we're not making any accusations about Russell Crowe or otherwise. And
bad enough having Morgan Freeman's legal team on my back last week. Am I
right? Thank you, Gladiator, for sponsoring this episode. Calling. Another random article that I generated was the following. Jonu Station. That's Jonu
Sorry,
Station.
Do you want to remove that little plum stuck in your throat? No, wait, hang on.
You'll see why I did that. That was a very good accent. Was it? Fine.
Okay.
Jonu Station. Jonu Station.
Much better. Thank you.
Jonu Station. It's a one-line entry, so it's brief to the point, like my favourite Wikipedia articles. Jonu Station is a station on the Choilima line of the Pyongyang Metro. It is located a short distance from Chongsung Station.
Is that it?
That's it. It's got a nice photo of one of the murals at the Jonu Metro Station, which is of a man holding a red book and a scroll. It's very communist in its nature, this particular mural, and it reminds me of the Moscow Metro, which is fantastically ornate and beautiful, has sculptures and lots of communistic references, and certainly makes the Circle Line look rather dated.
Don't get me out of the Circle Line. Although those new trains, actually, very wide berths, I quite like just stretching my legs out. I'm not saying that I'm lying prostrate as I take the Circle Line, but there would be plenty of space to lie down head to toe if you wanted to, is my point.
Well, the Circle Line has become, not only wider, but also the carriages don't end. It's this straight, I'm more of a Victoria Line man, but the Circle Line there's no gap between the carriages. You just look the whole way up the train. And also, this is really weird to reveal this, but I quite like to play a game with myself because I'm kind of fun like that. And I like to stand in the middle of the carriage, and I like to balance without touching any of the poles or handholds. And you might think, Edward, is that to do with the novel coronavirus? And it's actually not. I did this before the coronavirus, and I like to try and balance. And the thing about the Circle Line is I can actually look the whole way down the train and understand where the bends are coming up, so I can almost actually position myself a bit like a surfer and get ready for the bend. So I can sort of do you do this?
So I think that the novel that springs to mind is The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime. But no, Edward, I've not surfed a tube carriage. I think it's an interesting thing to do. I think that actually this is quite a COVID-safe or COVID-friendly activity because you are essentially avoiding clasping the poles, the support poles. And I think everyone's idea of a nightmare in this new world which we live in is the act of touching a publicly shared pole. That's the worst. That's the worst.
You're quite right. I mean, forever I will now be even more of a germaphobe, and the simple pleasure of surfing my way down the tunnels of the Circle Line will become not just a simple pleasure, but in fact a necessity, perhaps. But, to return to Pyongyang, of course, the capital of North Korea, I can't imagine people surf down the Choilima line.
No, sadly, I think you wouldn't get subway surfers such as yourself in Pyongyang. I think it's more likely to see subway mourners, people who, have their heads buried in a book or something and trying not to think about how sad their lives are.
A book on Juche ideology, which is Kim Il-sung's interpretation of communism, I believe. So, yeah, probably a book on that. Very unlikely to be a book on much else, in fact. They don't have copies of George Orwell's 1984 in the Democratic People's Republic of North Korea, the DPRK. That would be quite ironic, actually, to have a book by George Orwell on the North Korean tube. But the trains probably run on time. Let's leave it on that optimistic note. Thank you to our Supreme Leader, Kim Jong-un, for sponsoring this episode of Earth Calling. We wish him well. He's had a couple of scrapes with bad health, so I hope he's doing well and that Lil Rocket Man is in fighting form.
'Cause I'm a rocket man!
Burning out my fuse out here alone. That's all we've got time for today, but as ever, thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. Please do give us a rating, download, and subscribe. If you want, send us a voice note even. And if you have Instagram, give us a follow at earth_calling_pod. What a name that rolls straight off the tongue.
And do tune in next week when Ed and I will be joining the endless upswipe that is TikTok, attempting to become just as #TikTok famous as the D'Amelio family. And if you don't know who that is, then you're just going to have to be there. See you then. Earth out.